Welcome to Green Hills Shadow Chapter 9 Acknowledging, and the changes that come with it. Tom had gone away for a couple hours tops. He filled Wade in about Shadow and updated Carl in person about the hedgehog and thanked him for the shoes he managed to find. By the time it was 2:30 in the afternoon, he checked into the department and helped Wade with some paperwork and cleared his own desk in case he did decide to take a holiday to help the black hedgehog adjust. He's hoping to introduce him to his best friend and a few others. He just wanted him to be comfortable first. Wade called him over about getting donuts for the kids and the newest Green Hills resident. It was basically a rite of passage. So both left the station and drove to get a dozen donuts, some for Wade and some for Tom's family.
Did he like the items I got him?
Wade asked Tom, who was driving back to his house.
I know you said he was grateful for the shoes, but did he check the other stuff?
I'm not sure. I'd have to ask Knuckles since that's who he spends the most time with. What did you get him?
Tom replied, keeping his eye on the road.
Just essentials like his own toothbrush and some more sock variety. Oh, and a plastic tumbler so Sonic doesn't need to lend his anymore. It'll be the best plastic tumbler in your house. You're welcome.
Wade popped one of the donuts in his mouth with delight on his face. Tom chuckled at the declaration of the plastic cup.
And how much do I...
No.
Wait, at least let me go half done.
Tom tried to bargain with the deputy.
Let me think. No?
Wade could just feel the side-eye his best friend was giving him.
Oh, Tom, come on. It's not a big deal.
You got Sonic a hoodie when he first came to live with us.
It wasn't that much.
You got Tails an airplane kit model.
Dude, it wasn't that expensive either.
And you got Knuckles a bed set when they both joined.
You both had a house to repair. Did you forget that nugget?
Wade countered back, raised a brow, and Tom groaned.
Details. I appreciate it though. I'm not saying I don't.
Wade took in his expression and body language. Tom looked tired, and he must have felt tired. From what he's told Wade, Shadow was reluctant, not that keen on either him or Maddie, and was full of distrust. It's clear it's taken its toll on him, and it's only been a few days, but Wade reckons it's because Tom had to keep guessing and make assumptions on what the black hedgehog needed or wanted and not step on too many boundaries to set him off. Plus, the ever-growing list of surprises must have drained the sheriff, and it did. Tom thought back on the things that kept sticking out. Shadow also had chaos abilities like Sonic and Knuckles, had effective and faster healing than the other 3 aliens in the house. It was completely new territory for him and Maddie.
I know you do. But just let me help.
Wade shut the case of donuts.
No shame in it. Or are you worried I'll be the favorite?
I mean, Knuckles pretty much does think I'm better.
He grinned, causing the sheriff to snort.
Oh yeah, keep telling yourself that, pal.
Tom grinned back in humor at his deputy. He glanced at the road that led to his house.
I'll see how tonight goes before I call in for holidays. You really don't mind covering for me?
Nah, you'd do the same. Besides, not much crime goes on around here anyway. And nothing too interesting besides alien shenanigans, which is always a highlight.
No sooner did they pull into the driveway, Sonic raced outside with a wild expression on his face, and his quills were light blue, sparking somewhat. His eyes were small, like he was in a panic.
Dad?
He cried out, and Tom felt his heart drop. Both of the humans hurriedly got out the car, with Tom almost running to Sonic, and Wade struggled to keep up.
Sonic, what?
It is Shadow.
He looked between Tom, then into the hallway, his hands pressed deeply onto his head.
He's not listening to Knuckles. I don't know what to do.
His voice was full of panic. Tom didn't wait. He bolted past the blue hedgehog and into his house with speed he didn't realize he had. Wade didn't know to either stay outside or go in and check and risk upsetting the black hedgehog further, so he went over to Sonic to ask about the situation more and try to calm him down. Tom heard his eldest call out to the black hedgehog, and he was suddenly in the doorway, taking in the sight before him with wide eyes and had great concern. There was Shadow. His eyes were small and eyes were slits and completely unfocused, like he wasn't even here. Golden red sparks came from his hands and quills overall his entire body. His fur was sticking up, and some of his own quills looked sharper. He had his shoes on for whatever reason, but he was pressed up against the wall and grasping at his chest for dear life. Heavy erratic breathing, and the air was heavy with his energy. It was suffocating, and even he found it difficult to breathe. And there was Knuckles with his hands out trying to approach the panic-stricken hedgehog who wasn't even aware anymore.
Shadow, you are safe. What you are seeing, it isn't real.
Knuckles called out almost desperately. But unfortunately the hedgehog was deaf to the world around him.
Knuckles?
Father, do not come closer. You may get hurt.
The black hedgehog cried out suddenly, his sparks zapping around, struck Knuckles, and the echidna grunted out in pain from the sudden electricity that passed into him, and Tom let out a cry himself. The ceiling cracked more and the floor began to have some burn marks. The portraits of paintings and photographs fell down near the black hedgehog, but he was still unaware.
Stop!
His voice was full of anguish, screaming in a desperate attempt to stop something.
Don't shoot her!
Tom never heard such a desperate cry in all his life, and his heart stopped. Wild thoughts began to race in his mind. Her? Her who? Knuckles was still unable to reach the black hedgehog, who progressively got worse. Tom quickly put his sidearm away in the nearest drawer so it did not set off the sapient further should he happen to see it. Though it's not real to either of the residents, it's very much real to Shadow. He let out another gut-wrenching sound. Tom couldn't handle it anymore, nor was he listening to Knuckles' protests as he made his way forward despite the thick atmosphere surrounding them. The golden red sparks zipped against Tom and he hissed with the pain, but it didn't deter him. He crouched down to the hedgehog's level, going on one knee, and reached in, taking both of his hands into his own, and he held them firmly as the hedgehog tried to pull away, still unaware of the world around him right now.
Shadow,
He said in a calm and authoritative tone. His body was tense with anxiety but concern most of all. Shadow's breathing was erratic. He was still lost in the memory.
slow breaths.
He kept the hedgehog's hands in his. He could see his ears twitch ever so slightly like he heard him, and the sparks began to dwindle and the air began to return to normal as well. He was getting through.
Slowly, Shadow.
He kept his hands firmly in his own.
In between the breaths, tell me what you smell around you.
Shadow blinked, becoming responsive to Tom in some shape or form. The black hedgehog began to take shaky breaths, but slow. He felt Shadow tighten his hands around his own.
Maple syrup. Coffee.
And he kept listening things off. Knuckles crouched behind his father, whose eyes were still on the black hedgehog as he began to calm down. Then he noticed his red eyes become alert once again, finally recognizing Tom.
That's right, bud. Good job.
He then heard Sonic call out from the hallway.
Dad? Is he alright?
We have him, Sonic. Just let him come to.
Tom said gently to the blue hedgehog. He twisted his head to his oldest.
What happened?
I unintentionally brought up painful memories by the looks of it.
Knuckles muttered out, guilt written on his face, and his body was tense. Suddenly Tom was shoved aside and he was a little startled by his strength. Then he heard and saw Shadow be sick all over the floor, and he hesitated to touch him but decided to do it anyway and leaned over and rubbed the black hedgehog's back. He was quivering and racked with tension.
Oh, bud.
Tom winced in sympathy. His breathing struggled again due to the sudden vomiting. Tom saw Knuckles reach forward after a few minutes to try to wipe his mouth with a cloth, and Shadow flinched away unintentionally, going into Tom. His eyes were wide.
Shadow, it's all right. Take it slowly.
His hand was still rubbing against his back and firmly kept him in place.
In and out, buddy.
He instructed. The black hedgehog tried to steady his breathing once more. Knuckles had guilt on his face.
I am sorry, my friend.
He muttered. Then Tom heard Shadow speak, almost monotone, matter of fact.
I'm not smart.
Shadow's eyes looked glassy. Tom frowned. Knuckles tried to speak.
Hedgehog, this is not the time. I don't want you talking down.
I'm not smart.
He repeated, staring at nothing. Tom isn't listening to this.
Shadow.
I'm not smart because if I was, they'd still be alive.
He screamed out and both of them froze.
They're dead because of me.
Shadow banged his fist against the floor, cracks underneath him from the power. More unintentional damage to the house. But Tom didn't find that he cared right now. He listened to Shadow. His tone was one of anguish and pain. His expression was full of it as well. The area above his nose had scrunched up and his lips quivered, losing himself again into another memory. And so Tom waited for an explanation, and he returned to rubbing the hedgehog's back gently, but Shadow didn't acknowledge him. Tom silently waited. Knuckles watched, waiting for him to speak as well, but it didn't seem like he was going to. The only sound to the room was Shadow's hectic breathing. But Shadow whimpered suddenly.
I deserved the pain. I don't deserve this kindness.
Shadow whispered quietly, staring at the floor, and Tom halted in his movement. Shadow blames himself for something in his past beyond his control. Someone was shot, Oh gosh, what on earth happened? Tom swallowed the lump in his throat. He thought and felt that being a captive was deserved. All that pain and implications from the injuries were deserved. That thought alone broke Tom in more ways than he could ever think. He carried so much hurt and he had no one to help or convince him otherwise. So Tom took a brave step. He removed his hand from Shadow's back and placed both of his own on the hedgehog's cheeks and lifted the black sapient's head to look at him. There wasn't any fight in Shadow. Sorrowful red eyes gazed into Tom's own blue ones.
Don't you ever say that.
Tom firmly said and kept Shadow looking at him, pain and even guilt in those ruby eyes.
No one deserves what you went through, Shadow.
Tom's tone and expression was firm but kind.
It wasn't your fault.
The black hedgehog didn't look like he fully believed the father of three, but Tom wasn't going to let up. In his own heart, he knows it was never Shadow's fault.
It wasn't your fault.
Tom repeated softly, firm in tone still. Shadow clawed at Tom's hands to try to pull him off, but Tom didn't let go. He won't let him go. The hedgehog needed to know he had people in his life now. Knuckles watched the exchange and the sorrow was on his face, and he was unashamed of showing it.
You don't even know what happened.
Shadow whispered, his eyes threatening to spill. Tom, though, was unyielding.
Then tell me, Shadow. Help me understand. But it will never be your fault.
Tom then felt his hand crack slightly from Shadow's unintentional strong grip and he winced. But he still wasn't letting him go. Because if he did, the kid may never come back and Tom could never live with himself. Knuckles leaned over somewhat to check his father's hand, concern in his amethyst eyes for his father and the black sapient, but he did not budge from his position like Tom didn't. It was just downright cruel how Shadow felt about himself.
If you knew, you'd recoil. You'd run. All of you would.
Shadow could barely get his voice out now. He's so sure that he would be rejected by them if they knew the truth of his past. Because that's what he's been told all his life. Well, not anymore.
No, Shadow. I'm not going anywhere, bud. None of us are. I promise.
Tom could see Shadow look up at him, eyes wishing he could believe him. All that sorrow and pain could be seen, expression full uncertainties. But Tom waited, keeping his hands on the hedgehog's cheek still, rubbing them with his thumbs, ensuring some level of comfort in any way he possibly could.
Gone.
He whispered and Tom froze in horror at the name, recognizing it immediately.
They wanted me. The professor, he said no.
Shadow's voice cracked, full of pain, struggling to come out, his eyes glassy still.
What do you think happened?
Tom felt Shadow's grip become tight again on his hands.
They're dead, because...
No, absolutely not. Tom held his stance.
No, it's not because of you. It's because of them. What they did was not your fault. It never will be your fault.
He used his thumbs to stroke the black hedgehog's cheeks in assurance. And with that, the dam burst. The first few tears spilled from him, then a choke. Shadow's face scrunched up, followed by a sob, and the years of unshed tears came down on his muzzle onto Tom's hands. His sobs got louder and he nearly screamed, the sadness and the pain of it all. Tom couldn't take it anymore. He sat and pulled the black hedgehog into his chest and was met with no resistance. His arms went around him with his hand in the hedgehog's quills and the other holding him close, and he shut his own eyes, which were threatening to spill as well from the pain of this kid's tormented cries. Shadow clung to his shirt, clung to someone for the first time in years, and forgetting his hate of touch by human hands, Tom rocked the black hedgehog back and forth and rubbed his back softly to smooth him. Knuckles was nearby, but Tom's world was just him and this poor kid right now. He pressed his own cheek against Shadow's head, cradling him, and kept his rock of back and forth, trying to be comforting to the black hedgehog as he listened.
You'll make it through this. You aren't alone anymore, Shadow.
He stroked the hedgehog's quills back gently, like he would whenever Sonic was upset. More sobs escaped from him and he had an iron grip on Tom's shirt, but he still kept Shadow in his steady arms, unwilling to let him go. Wade was outside the front and had unintentionally heard some of what had been going on, but was too busy staring into the hallway with a blank stare. He wasn't sure how he exactly felt. It killed his heart a little, that much he was sure of. He took a deep, nervous breath and pushed the door open a little more, stepping in to find both Sonic and Tails in the hallway. Both of them were upset and frazzled by the looks of it. So Wade bent down to both of their levels, gaining their attention on him. Sonic had bit his lip hard by the looks of it and had blood on it. Tails was more or less startled to see him, as if he's just realizing Wade was outside. Not a sound came from either Mabian though, so Wade held out both his arms in an unspoken gesture that he was there. Tails took it. He nearly slammed into Wade full force and hugged the man for dear life. Sonic pursed his lip and stayed against the wall. He might just want Tails to have the full comfort from the deputy at this moment. So Wade wrapped his arm around the kit and stroked his head with affection and hummed softly to the fox who was quivering against him, obviously shaken, and tried to keep the tears at bay.
It'll be alright, Tails.
Wade muttered out to the young boy. Wade sometimes would forget Tails' actual age because he seemed so mature for it, but at times like these it reminded him he was still just a child. He heard the fox sniff and felt some of his shoulder getting wet.
How much did you hear?
Enough.
Wade pulled Sonic in with his free hand and the hedgehog resisted at first but eventually allowed the hug, and he clung onto Wade the same way Tails was doing currently. And they stayed there, Wade on his knees hugging both the boys. Not a sound came from him as he listened to Tails' sniffles and Sonic's breathing in an effort to keep his anger down. Then Wade had an idea.
Say, why don't we make some hot chocolate?
He said, gaining their attention after pulling back a little bit.
Hot chocolate always made me feel better when I felt overwhelmed.
Both of them looked to each other, Tails beginning to have red under his eyes and Sonic just looked worn out.
Shadow's cup is upstairs. I'll go grab it along with mine.
Wade nodded and took Tails' hand, gently getting himself up from the floor.
Where's Ozzy?
He asked, leading Tails into the kitchen as Sonic went up the stairs rather slowly for the blue hedgehog.
He's outside the back. We didn't want him getting caught in Shadow's unintended hurricane.
Wade hummed an acknowledgement, then lifted the kid onto the chair at the kitchen island, and Wade began pulling out the hot chocolate packets from the cupboards as well as the plastic tumblers and a mug for Tom. It was a gift from the boy saying best father in the world. And with that he pulled a velvetizer from the underneath side. It was a Christmas gift he got them before Sonic moved in. It'll make the hot chocolate that much smoother in all its chocolatey goodness. Sonic went into the kitchen, still moving slow for the hedgehog, and handed Wade the 2 cups, who started rinsing them out.
He liked it.
Sonic suddenly said, pulling open the fridge and used the stool his parents had out to get the milk and whipped cream. Wade dried the cups with a cloth, unsure of what Sonic meant.
The cup? Shadow? He liked it.
He muttered, pulling out the 2 items. Wade gave the hedgehog a small smile.
Well then, I'm glad to hear that.
And started putting the packets of hot chocolate into the velvetizer. Sonic set the milk on the counter for Wade and then took his seat next to Tails, who was resting his head onto his arms, and Sonic flopped to do the same. Both drained by today's events. So Wade worked in silence, putting some milk in the machine and then turned it on, and all he has to do now is wait.
Whipped cream and cocoa powder.
He asked, getting 2 grunts of agreement. He turned to the 2 and leaned onto the island as well.
Hey.
A pair of blue eyes and green eyes looked at the deputy.
It'll be alright.
He repeated to both of them, but Sonic didn't look convinced.
How? You don't even know the stuff he said to us, Wade. Humans like you and our parents did bad things to him. Tell me again how it'll be alright.
Because he's got you 3.
Sonic opened his mouth and closed it again, not expecting that response to come out of Wade.
You sound so sure we can help him that way.
Tails said, muffled by his arm somewhat, and Wade gave him a raise of the eyebrow.
Boys, it's not your responsibility, sure. But as a family unit, we can just try and be there for him. It's not going to work magically right away, I know that. But I'm positive, because look how much you 3 have helped each other, and look how much you've overcome.
Wade leaned over and stroked Tails' fringe back somewhat, his ears drooping against Wade's hand.
We just need to be patient and let him open up. And show him the good things now. The good in some people. And heck, what better way than Green Hills?
Wade tried to express in a sure way tone to both of the drained kids in front of him. Gosh, he felt tired just by looking at them. But Tails perked up a little bit under Wade's touch and his 2 tails wagged, making the deputy smile. And with that the velvetizer went off, so he went over and began dishing out the hot chocolate, topped with whipped cream, cocoa powder, and marshmallows on each of the plastic tumblers. He gave Tails his first, then Sonic.
Wade?
Wade turned to the side to see Knuckles standing there puzzled, not expecting to see him here. Knuckles was wiping his hands with a towel, then put on fresh new gloves.
Hey, Knuckles. I take it Tom's still with Shadow.
He sat Knuckles' hot chocolate in front of him on the island.
Yes. Father is still with Shadow. He did not say you had arrived with him. I have just finished cleaning Shadow's breakfast off the floor.
He walked over, taking the cup, and bowed his head a little in thanks for the hot chocolate.
Thank you for the beverage.
The red echidna sounded just as tired as the other two.
Would it be a loaded question to ask how he is?
It would be very much so.
Knuckles replied quickly, sipping the hot chocolate, having some whipped cream on his nose.
Well, Tom probably didn't exactly have the time to tell you I was in the car. I've only seen him move that fast as when Sonic took unwell 2 winters ago.
The blue hedgehog blinked.
He did? All I did was catch the cold.
We must work on your immunity, brother. Pitiful if a cold can take you out.
Knuckles answered back, causing the blue hedgehog to scowl at him.
Enough of that. Knuckles, when you get hit with a cold.
I will not be so weak as to worry mother or father.
Doesn't work like that. When you get hit with an earth cold, it's gonna hit you harder than you think.
Wade exclaimed with a touch of amusement in his voice at his declaration. Tails nodded his head in agreement with Wade, making Knuckles gape at his younger brother, and Sonic smirked.
3 against 1. Knux?
Sonic mocked at the echidna's offended expression.
Regardless, any new parent would react the way Tom did when he heard Sonic catching the cold. 'Cause he didn't know if it affected you guys worse or the same way as it does us.
The first time it happened to me, I was in my cave, unable to move for a week. Was sick a lot. Not a fun experience.
Wade's gonna have to unpack that another time. He gazed at the velvetizer going off again and began pouring out Shadow and Tom's hot chocolate.
Knuckles, you wanna take this to Tom and Shadow? I don't know how he would react to me.
Knuckles hummed a little, sitting his drink down.
I do not know if the hedgehog's stomach can take it, but I will take his to him and father. I thank you for understanding.
Wade chuckled at the eloquent way Knuckles would speak. Always did find it to be a joy to listen to.
Tell Tom I'm in here with Sonic and Tails, would ya? And let him know I'll let Maddie know something went down.
Want me to come, Knuckles? Just to see how he is? That alright with you, bro?
He looked to the young fox, who nodded and sipped his hot chocolate, making him feel warm. Knuckles smiled at Tails and handed Sonic Tom's mug, and both went off into the living room, where Tom was pressed up against the wall, still cradling Shadow in his arms. The black hedgehog's eyes were half shut, and he looked worse than Sonic felt with being tired and drained. He had streaks down his face still, but most of it had dried at this point. His head was still pressed up against their father's chest, and Tom's cheek was resting upon Shadow's head as well, stroking the quills as comforting as he could. Obviously, Shadow had quietened down at this point, still didn't rid his body of the tension, or the sorrow and painful expression that still lingered on his face, but at least he sorta looked like he calmed down. Tom's work shirt was absolutely soaked in some areas, but obviously he didn't care too much about that. He opened his eyes and saw Knuckles and Sonic stand there.
Here, Dad. Wade made you both hot chocolate. He's sitting with Tails currently.
Sonic held up the mug and sat it down next to his adoptive father. Shadow's ear twitched at that, and Sonic cursed himself, bracing himself for Shadow's reaction to another human being in the house. But he didn't make a single move or sound over it. The ear acknowledged what Sonic said, but he didn't react, and Sonic blinked. Yeah, he's well out of it still. Tom let out a little sigh and gave both Knuckles and Sonic a small smile.
Oh, really? Tell him thank you.
He muttered out, voice completely drained from the hurricane of emotions he probably jumped through. Knuckles crouched down to both their levels and slowly held out the cup Wade got for the black sapient, filled with the same hot chocolate.
Shadow?
He began softly, another ear twitch, but no reaction still.
Our uncle made you and father a beverage. It'll warm you up on the inside. I will leave it here for you in case you wish to try some.
But no reaction. It looked like Shadow had given up right now, but that's to be expected. After what they all heard and just gone through, it's no wonder he didn't have the energy to do anything. Knuckles certainly didn't feel like it, but he needed to be strong for his brothers, since his father was being strong for Shadow. So he sat the cup down next to Tom, near Tom's own mug. Sonic then sat on the side where Shadow's eyes could see him and just pressed his back up against the wall the same way Tom had done, and put his own knees to his chest and pressed his head against Tom's body and shut his eyes, enjoying the warmth his father gave off. Tom now had 2 hedgehogs using him as a type of cushion, but he found that he didn't really mind. Knuckles chuckled a little and sat cross-legged in front of him.
It seems you have become a hostage, father. You'll never be able to move again.
Yeah, well, I don't mind.
Tom answered his oldest back, still keeping a small rock and back rhythm for Shadow. Sonic's head pressed up against his arm followed along without a care in the world.
I think I will take the time off work, though.
He hummed quietly to himself. Because Shadow's going to need a lot of adjusting, and as much as Knuckles is responsible and mature, he wasn't an adult. Tom and Maddie were, and unfortunately they'll have to tread over his personal boundaries to help him.
Yes, that is probably wise. Do you think he will forgive me?
Forgive you? What do you have to be forgiven for?
Knuckles rubbed the back of his neck, feeling the tension in it.
I unintentionally brought up his bad memories, but I do not know how I did it.
Unintentionally, Knuckles? You didn't mean for it to happen. There isn't anything to forgive. What happened here wasn't your fault. Just like it wasn't Shadow's fault with what happened to him.
He gave his father a look of question.
How can you when you don't know Shadow's triggers? He hasn't told any of us, and I doubt he knows them himself. Right now he's figuring stuff out with us by the looks of it.
Tom stroked the unresponsive black hedgehog's quill still.
Son, don't be hard on yourself.
Knuckles didn't answer and leaned himself back against the back of the couch, contemplating his father's words.
I shall take your words into consideration, Father.
It's not your responsibility, Knuckles. That's the job for the adult.
He then looked at his blue child.
Sonic, do you mind? I can't exactly have a sip.
He gestured to the hot chocolate. Sonic grumbled unapologetically and sat himself up a little away from Tom and held out his mug for him to take a sip, which he gladly did. Sonic kept his emerald eyes on Shadow, but he still didn't look all that responsive, nor did he acknowledge the slight shift Tom did. Then Sonic went back quickly to the position he was in before, after sitting the mug back down, both the hot chocolate and his father's warmth making him on the verge of sleeping.
Thanks. Your mom's gonna end up taking time off as well. How was Tails?
Tom asked either of his kids.
He's with Wade, Dad. He's just a little upset, but we all are. Luckily, he didn't see most of it. He was too busy getting Ozzy outside.
Tom nodded, resting his cheek back on Shadow's head. He still can't believe what he heard. He's going to have to tell Maddie and get a family meeting. The fact that Gun didn't just ruin his sister-in-law's wedding, tasered Sonic and put him and Tails in cages in hopes to do whatever to them, they also had Shadow? It made his blood boil. His rage towards them won't be quelled anytime soon. In fact, he's likely to land himself in cuffs again, because the moment he sees Commander Walters, he's gonna punch the ever-daylights out of him. That is if Maddie doesn't choke the life out of him first. He just hopes Gun stays away from Green Hills regardless. Knuckles got back up.
I'm going to inform Wade what is happening and check on our youngest. I shall return shortly.
And off his oldest went, leaving him with two drained and sleepy hedgehogs, with only the sound of their breathing filling the silence. Ozzy won't be happy with being stuck outside, but at the moment Shadow didn't need to get startled, especially if he's not 100% there with them yet. Tom could just feel the need for sleep himself, since he ended up being heated by two furry hedgehogs. Shadow's hot chocolate remained untouched but still warm. So Tom hummed to both of the teens and kept his rhythm of rocking back and forth to the black hedgehog, with Sonic's head following since it was pressed up against his arm. But then he had an idea.
Shadow?
Muttered out, and he felt the hedgehog's free ear go in his direction.
I'm gonna lift you up, buddy. I'm not going to let go. I'm just gonna move us to somewhere more comfortable, okay?
He felt the black hedgehog's fist cling onto his shirt more, and Tom had a small smile. He was about to tell Sonic, but the blue hedgehog gotten himself up, picking up the cup and mug so Tom didn't knock them over.
Thank you, son.
Tom held Shadow close. He wouldn't be surprised if the black sapient could hear his heartbeat. He got up, still cradling the unresponsive hedgehog, and made his way up the stairs and into his and Maddie's bedroom, with Sonic following suit. The blue hedgehog placed both of the drinks on the bedside drawer and closed over the curtains for Shadow, giving the room a dulled light appearance. Tom sat on the bed, kicking off his shoes, and pressed himself up against the headboard of his bed. Still in the holding position, he left the black hedgehog's shoes on. Shadow didn't move, nor did he react. What Tom did notice, he finally closed his eyes and seemed content with listening to the human's beating heart. Sonic had zipped back down the stairs in the space of a couple seconds with Shadow's blanket, and Tom smiled gratefully, and he took it, keeping it half on him and half on Shadow.
I'm here, Shadow. I'm here.
He repeated in a whisper for the black hedgehog to hear. Sonic climbed in on the other side and snuggled right close to both him and Tom, perfectly content with adding the drowsy feeling to his father. And that's where Wade and Knuckles found them later, all three of them asleep and forgotten hot chocolates left on the table. Wade ended up having to call the department and get someone to cover him until Maddie got home. He played a game with Tails to keep the young kid occupied while the three slept the heartache away. Knuckles had rearranged the paintings and photographs back on the wall that had been knocked down. Other than that, the afternoon passed by them, and Wade ordered a pizza and fries and other sorts of food. Tails did look much better after the game. Ozzy was curled up against him, and he was reading a book about airplanes, no surprise to Wade. The door opened and Wade knew who it was immediately.
I'm so sorry, I tried to leave as soon as I could.
But Wade put a finger to his lip and gestured up the stairs, and she paused following his hand.
Just let them sleep it off for now. It was rough. Don't worry though, Wade. Have everything almost back to where it was. Minus the new cracks on the ceiling and marks on the floor.
Hi, Mom.
Tails called out but ended up getting Mother smushed into a hug.
Oh, Tails, baby, are you okay? I'm sorry, I was in the middle of doing an animal's surgery.
Maddie kissed her youngest, who was blushing at her sudden attention.
I'm fine.
He muffled out against her, his tails wagging up and down. Knuckles came down the stairs to greet her and entered in her vicinity.
Ah, Mother. Welcome home. And yes, they are still dozing in sleep's warm embrace.
Knuckles reported to Wade, but was suddenly pulled into the bear hug of his adoptive mother. Boy, she had some strength, and Wade laughed at hearing the protesting of Knuckles.
Well, they could use it.
Wade grinned at the two boys being showered with love by Maddie.
I hope it's all right, but I ordered takeout. I don't think anyone was in the right mindset to cook today.
Maddie stopped in her showering, letting both of them have air, and she sighed in relief.
Thank you, Wade. Honestly, though, what happened?
I unintentionally may have brought up painful memories, Mother.
Knuckles said, which came to a great surprise to her. Knuckles did what?
It was an accident, Mom. We aren't even sure what triggered it.
Tails said, fixing his fringe.
Triggered? Like a...
Her eyes widened and she looked at Wade, who had a grim line on his lip.
It sounds similar, doesn't it? It doesn't surprise me, though, from the implications alone.
Neither of them were willing to say in front of Tails, even if he was smart enough to know what they meant.
Father calmed him, Mother.
Maddie looked back at her oldest being hit with another surprise. Tom, calm down, Shadow? So she looked at the three in front and gave them a look that said to explain everything now, and for the next several minutes all she could do is sit there numbly. Oh boy, there is a lot to unpack. She was sitting on her couch, rubbing her head from all the information, and the pain she felt for Shadow increased tenfold, and she sighed, wishing she was here earlier to have helped her other kids during that episode of his.
There is one thing I do not understand. Who is gone?
Well, you could hear a pin drop. All three residents looked at the red echidna in shock, and the echidna didn't flinch under their gaze.
You do not know?
Tails gave him an incredulous stare.
I was not there?
Wade rubbed his face. That explains it. Knuckles wasn't there when the wedding was disrupted or the arresting of Tom, and the imprisonment of the two others he now calls brothers.
Well, honey, you know my sister?
Aunt Rachel? Yes, she is quite spirited.
Yeah, she is. Her wedding, well, it was a sting operation, hopes to find out things about Sonic.
Yeah, when Sonic and I escaped the avalanche, I was out cold, but apparently they tasered Sonic, put me and him in cages and cuffed Dad.
Tails helpfully added, which did not help at all. The echidna went silent and his eyes narrowed, a rage beginning to form.
What?
Not a good idea to have said that to him. Wade could feel the sweat beginning to form on his head.
Knuckles.
Dishonor. They tried to capture my brothers?
To be fair, we were not brothers at the time.
That does not matter. You were in no position to defend yourself. You and Sonic were harmed because of me, and they had the nerve to arrest our father for defending his family?
He spat out, getting angrier.
And now we find out they've kept Shadow as a prisoner?
It was certainly a surprise to hear that they were already aware of aliens, especially because of Shadow. He was Maddie and Tom's worst fear in every aspect. He was kept as a trophy or a scientific captive, like the way the Robotnik guy wanted for Sonic. If they already had someone like Shadow, what were they gonna do to Sonic? It made her sick with the thought of it. Wade bravely put his hand on the echidna's shoulder and ended up getting a heated glare. He gave Knuckles a sheepish smile.
Knuckles, lower your voice. If Shadow wakes up and hears that word, we might make him panic again.
With that, Knuckles took a deep breath and began counting down an echidna, and he kept going. Maddie looked lost at what he was saying, but she took his hand into hers, and the echidna still had anger on his face, but it seemed to be working.
I'm angry too, Cranberry. It's just an ever-growing list of horrible things they've done.
I will restore honor.
Tails looked at him, tilting his head, and had an ear down and one up.
How do you plan to restore honor?
By breaking their bones.
he said with a tone not to be challenged. Wade put his hands together like he was about to pray and shut his eyes, taking a big breath in and out.
Knuckles,
I am not hearing you.
you can't just break government officials' bones.
He exclaimed, trying to reason with the echidna.
Watch me. What right did they have? On what they did to Shadow? If that is your argument, then it's a poor one.
Knuckles, I'm on your side here. But these guys are a lot more powerful than just me and Tom as law enforcement. Because they can bend and make things go their way. I just don't want you to.
So they flaunt their power over the weak and vulnerable. I'm not hearing much of a reason not to break some bones. Government, tribe, or not, what right do they have to do what they did? They do not. I will not let tyrants such as them get away with their misdeeds. That is how a cowardly snake acts. That is how corruption spreads.
Wade looked at Maddie for help, but both of them could feel their own arguments in trying to talk Knuckles down, dwindling, and Tails looked taken in by his older brother's bravery and declaration.
No matter how large a snake may become, it will eventually swallow too much and it is bound to rip its sides from the greed. And look at that, its sides are ripping.
Maddie smiled at her brave warrior.
Knuckles, while I want to encourage you, these people are dangerous. It's not like Mobius with powers and all. These people have machines, guns, robots. No morals either.
She tried to use examples. She really had no idea how Mobius would work in this case, especially if Shadow was harmed there too. It was a no-win situation. Knuckles gave his mother a look, taking in her words, but he still didn't look like his mind would be changed.
To look away is never going to fix anything. To not acknowledge just lets their power spread and grow like corruption.
Knuckles Wachowski, we are acknowledging, but what Shadow needs is safety first before we go declaring war on government-funded maniacs. Green Hills is safe for him to heal and grow. If you go marching, he will bring attention to the fact that he's here. Knuckles, please.
She put her hands on his again. Knuckles grumbled, taking a deep sigh.
I shall try not to.
Thank you.
Unless they appear in Green Hills, I'm not changing my stance, Mother. I will not allow them to throw their power here, so we have an understanding. I will not strike the snake unless it attempts to swallow here.
It was the best. Wade and Maddie were gonna get, so both nodded and Knuckles grunted in affirmation, and Tails' eyes were big at his big brother's speech. He was ready to defend Green Hills and his family, and he didn't hold fear in his tone.
Good. Because I intend to let them make the first mistake in this war.
Both of the adults sighed. Knuckles meant what he said, that he would try. But he didn't exactly promise now, did he? After cooling Knuckles in his declaration of war against Ji-Yuan, the food arrived and Wade and Maddie paid half each and began dishing out the food on plates and trays. Wade gave Tails and Knuckles their share while Maddie went up the stairs to wake her boys for theirs. She may have snuck a picture of the three sleepers for keepsakes, and it would be the very first photo they have of Shadow. It would be a start to a new chapter in his life, hopefully. It was far too cute of a scene not to have it in her phone. Tom was lightly snoring away, with one arm around the black hedgehog securely and the other around Sonic, who was smushed in, his face against Tom's ribs while Shadow was on Tom's chest like a cat. It was an adorable scene, and you would never think something tragic happened earlier in the day. She sat lightly on the bed next to Sonic and stroked his quills back gently. The hedgehog made a sound like he acknowledged someone was touching him, but made no effort in opening his eyes.
Hey there, Blueberry. We have some food for you.
Sonic's ear twitched, and he twisted his head just enough to open one eye, and his emerald green locked onto her figure, waiting for his vision to adjust, and she gave him a smile.
Pizza and fries. Sounds good, doesn't it?
She heard the blue hedgehog's stomach grumble, and she giggled lightly. He mumbled unintelligibly and rubbed his face and let out a tired huff.
It does, but I'd rather sleep more.
I know, but you won't sleep tonight if you keep going.
She held out her arms for him to climb into a hug.
Come here, baby.
She muttered, and the hedgehog pulled himself up with great effort and climbed into her arms for the hug. She hugged him close, and he returned the favor.
I'll wake up your dad and Shadow if you want to go have a slice now.
No, I don't mind waiting.
He mumbled out, still adjusting to waking up.
Sides, I don't know how Shadow's gonna feel when he realizes he's being cradled by Dad. He isn't exactly compos mentis.
Maddie let a slight concern to her tone. Sonic did have a point there. If Shadow wasn't fully aware of his surroundings after his episode, then he might not react all that good with lying on top of Tom like a cat. Sonic then pulled away from his mom and stretched his arms in the air. She was about to lean over to wake up Tom when she saw Shadow make some movement underneath the blanket. His head moved some against Tom's chest and his red eyes fluttered open somewhat. She heard him inhale deeply and his vision trying to adjust from his heavy slumber. She held her breath and waited for the dreaded freakout to start. But it didn't happen. He must have known he was on top of Tom, but he didn't have too much of a reaction. Maybe because he was coming out the sleep? So she exhaled the breath she kept and gave him a small but assuring smile. Sonic noticed too but didn't make much of a conversation, probably waiting for either Maddie or Shadow to speak first. Shadow let out a small groan of tiredness, his ear listening to Tom's heartbeat still, and he twisted his lower body somewhat to get comfortable on the human. Wow, he really didn't intend to recoil. Tom's arm was still around Shadow, holding him securely. It surprised Maddie greatly. She decided to break the silence.
Shadow, are you hungry? We have some pizza or fries.
She waited for him to nod or shake his head. Sonic yawned, ruffling his own back quills tiredly.
Pizza is a new food to try at least.
Shadow didn't look all that interested in eating. If anything, he looked ready to go back to sleep.
You won't sleep tonight, sleepyhead. I told Sonic the same thing.
Maddie spoke softly to the black hedgehog who still looked in a sleepy daze, and Sonic responded with an affirmative grunt.
So do you want a slice with some fries? There's lots to choose from.
Shadow let out a tired huff, like he really didn't want to move, and she almost snorted at his expression, but managed to hold it back.
I can bring it to you, Shadow, but I need to wake up Tom too.
She smiled at his unenthusiastic face. He acted more like a typical teen than he realized.
So what's it gonna be, Grumpy?
She felt Sonic's eyes boggle at her, not believing she felt like she could tease Shadow a little, but if anything she just wanted to try to keep things normal.
All right, fine.
He muttered out tiredly, and she couldn't believe he was willingly speaking around her. Her eyes were wide as were Sonic's. She felt her inner self shout in celebration. He shuffled himself up from Tom's chest and she expected him to get off him and head for his dinner with Sonic. But instead of doing that, Shadow shook Tom's shoulder in an effort to wake him up, and Tom groaned in his sleep. Sonic and Maddie were absolutely floored at Shadow, flabbergasted, both staring with open mouths gaping like fishes at the scene before them.
What?
Tom sleepily and confusedly muttered out, wondering what was happening, not aware it was Shadow shaking the man awake.
Food.
Shadow responded back to the human. His voice was stiff and awkward but still said it with some effort.
Right.
He mumbled out, not realizing Shadow was the one speaking to him. The black hedgehog nodded and pulled himself off Tom sluggishly, obviously not wanting to go away from the heat but still obeyed what Maddie said earlier. The black hedgehog yawned and edged himself over the bed.
Hold on. Wade's out in the living room. Shadow, we know how uncomfortable you are with humans. Don't push yourself.
Shadow gave Sonic a once-over, digesting the information about Wade. He knew the human was an earlier, but he really didn't have any energy to be concerned about. That and Knuckles as well as Tom wouldn't have allowed someone harmful to go near Shadow in that state, even if there was that ever-remaining doubt in his mind. If he's honest, he's beginning to feel rude.
He's not going to be offended if you don't want to see him.
Maddie said, breaking Shadow of his thoughts, and he chewed his lip and Sonic gave him a lopsided smile.
Mom's right. He understands Shadow. At your own pace.
Shadow blinked and gave him a glance. He started to feel guilt, which Sonic unintentionally caused, in Shadow's side. Not at all sure on what he wanted, he's so confused. Still uncomfortable, but he wanted to be brave for Maria's sake. Maddie got up though, misinterpreting his silence.
I'll go get the food. Don't push yourself, baby. It's been a long day after all.
She hummed and headed out the room, followed by Sonic to go get his own food. Suppose being brave would have to start another day.
I smell pizza.
He heard Tom start to wake up himself properly and he stretched, letting out a yawn.
And fries too.
Shadow responded back, pushing himself up to where Sonic was formerly sitting and waited.
Oh, sounds like we got a mix, son. Chicken wings and whatever else Wade and your mom ordered.
Tom automatically replied, rubbing his eyes, trying to understand how he fell asleep. Then it registered to his brain that it wasn't Sonic's voice that answered him. It had been Shadow. He blinked and turned his head to the black hedgehog, who was rubbing one of his rings on his wrists.
Oh, hey there, bud. I didn't realize you were awake.
He didn't seem as bothered being next to Tom, which was another surprise for the dad of three. He seemed more, well, Tom isn't sure of the word, but he's maybe getting a little optimistic.
Shadow, Are you alright?
Tom hesitatingly asked the black hedgehog, and he saw his ear twitch and he gave the human a glance.
I'm not sure.
He mumbled out and Tom waited for him.
I've never been allowed to think for myself or understand my emotions. Not anymore, at least. Until here.
Tom frowned but kept silent in case he wanted to share more.
I don't even know what I want.
Shadow whispered, mostly to himself. Tom kept silent still, letting Shadow have the option to keep speaking or stop. It was quite clear Shadow had low self-confidence and low self-esteem, but that wasn't his fault, it was the fault of Gun.
Well, why didn't we find out together?
Tom said back to the black hedgehog, who returned the gaze with some confusion written on his face.
I'm not going to push you into telling us everything, Shadow. You can tell us with what you're comfortable with, or until you're ready. But you're welcome here.
Shadow had a look of disbelief, that in some way he was still afraid that this could be a dream, or a trick, and Tom couldn't blame him. So he just had to be all the more assuring to the black sapient.
Let's learn together, Shadow.
Tom repeated, giving him a small smile.
So let's start again.
He cleared the throat and gestured around them.
Welcome to Green Hills, Shadow the Hedgehog.